Hey traders, Cousin Vinny coming to you on April the 28th, Sunday, with a look at the week ahead. If you managed to do any reading this weekend, you may have noticed that there was some talk about a new sequel to the LIBOR scandal sequel, in which the ISDA fix, as it's known, a benchmark for a $379 trillion market for interest rate swaps, had articles written about it regarding more collusion by banks, the big banks, and corruption. It's yet to see how this plays out, but looking at the bond market and also the S&P 500 as well as the other indices for the week, keep in the back of your mind that there are other things going on behind the scenes. As we are in the middle of earnings season, expectations are very high. If you read Carl's blog, you can see what he had to say about the last week regarding the market summary. He was talking about expectations being very high, and also that the current uptrend is very extended, which of course we know. We've seen a 139.558% increase if you look at the lows from March 2009 to the highs here at 1597.35. And the theme has been yield. Okay, so a lot of consumer staples, as I pointed out last week, stocks were doing very well, okay, as well as dividend paying utilities. Junk bonds, the 30-year treasuries made 2013 highs, and contrasting that with the U.S. growth-oriented cyclicals, most of the sectors closed below their 50-period moving averages. So that's the backdrop. The trend in the S&P 500 is still up, as we know. However, we are getting very extended, so one has to be wondering whether or not we can continue this move higher. As Ron pointed out on Friday, we've seen these periods between these pullbacks that the frequency is becoming closer together with the yearly cycle of sell in May and go away. Also note where stochastic is, and MACD looks like it's topping out here. We can also see on the weekly TLT chart this descending wedge that we broke above 4 weeks ago. We're currently in this flagging pattern, and MACD is pointing higher and stochastics is overbought. But this is a very bullish pattern until proven otherwise. Okay, it's holding up at this level here. If this continues, this would bode negatively towards the S&P 500 and stocks in general. And remember the time of the year that we're currently in, and the fact that we've had 5 months since our last pullback in November. So we're due, I won't say overdue, but we're due shortly. So keep an eye on your stocks if you're still trading bullish positions, and start thinking in bearish setups in the near future. At least that's what I'm doing. Also, with respect to the IEF, the 7-10-year Treasury Bond Fund, note the sideways action or range that we've been in since May of 2012. I believe Stephen Place had also mentioned that seasonality-wise, bonds tend to do better during the summertime, as you can see here. Okay, and here, and here, and also May, June, July, where we ran up in 2012. Looking at the sectors, IYR, the real estate shares, note the double top here. We had a doji on Thursday, and we had a little tail here, or shooting star, on Friday. It's possible that we could bounce off of this ascending trend line, ascending moving average, but note where RSI is, and it's highly likely that we could see a move lower this week, because we had some nice gains going into the middle of last week, into Wednesday of this past week. Also no stochastics and the selling volume that we saw Thursday, Friday. The transportation shares saw a nice move up the end of last week and the previous week, back above its 20 or its 30 and its 10 period moving averages. And we had a doji on Friday. Note the buying volume, and stochastic still has room on IYT. Materials had a nice run, had a peak on Thursday and then a nice selling bar on Friday. But we did see some buying towards the end of the day right here at the 10 period and the 30 period moving average. RSI's pointed a little bit lower. XLE also saw a lot of sellers come in on Thursday, and we're seeing some indecisive candles here on Thursday and Friday with RSI hovering sideways above 50. Also note volume and stochastics. I had a couple of banking stocks. I sold half on WFC and also GS. Last week we saw a little bit better performance on the week. We didn't sell off that much on Friday. Note these are off slightly. The Kirby levels up here, so you pull this back up. We're still in this right above this bar here, as well as RSI. Still above 50. It's not dropping quickly, but it is pointed down. XLI pretty much the same industrials as the XLF, and stochastics is pointing higher, as well as a crossover on MACD below 0. So I would keep an eye on XLI this week if we don't roll over on the SPX for a rotation. From the bearish standpoint, you could also look in the fact that we have a lower high here, and RSI has made a lower high. And stochastic is yet to get back over bought, but it did have a divergence here. We have a lower high, and we have a higher high here, the XLI. So we did see some divergence. XLK also had divergence here. Note where RSI is. We had a higher high here and a lower high on the stochastics, as well as the MACD. So watch what happens here this week on XLK technology. XLP did get extended last week and put in a high on Tuesday. We saw some selling on Wednesday, and these candles inside, or haramis inside of this candle on Thursday and Friday. RSI is continuing to move lower. If we don't get back above 70, this would be considered a bearish failure swing on the XLP RSI, as Wilder points out in his books. Note the selling bar, the selling volume on Wednesday as well. It was pretty substantial. XLU, as Carl pointed out last week in the chat room, as well as on his blog, high dividend yield paying stocks did very well. Okay, you can see the run up. We're still holding highs. RSI is overbought, as well as stochastics and MACD. You can see the volume here has been very significant. You could also look at your setups this week on XLU. If this turns over, you can look at some shorts on stocks that ran up since the beginning of the year. The healthcare sector, XLV, you can see we put in a higher high and a lower high on the RSI, so we have divergence there. We have a close right around the 10 period EMA, and you have to watch volume. Also, the stochastics is rolling over, as well as MACD, so it's a very good possibility XLV could come down and test the 30 period or your 20. I'll be looking for the possibility of a pullback to a box trade on XLV healthcare, as this run up hasn't been that long in the tooth. We had a crossover here in December. We had a pullback, 1, 2, 3. This is a third or fourth phase pullback, so I would keep an eye on this for a failure. This could also turn over and get a crossover, in which case we'd wait for this to pull down below. Taking a look at currencies real quick, the Japanese yen US dollar pair, we can see that this level we broke above, we came down and tested once. Looks like we might test it again. You can see the 30 period is the yellow moving average, and stochastics is pointing lower. We can see that weakness that stemmed from the Cypriot banking debacle or news, that we bottomed and we came up to this high that we put in on 416. We pulled back and we're holding the 30 period. So this is your first crossover, and this is your pullback into a box setup for a long here. Okay, you want to see a green candle on Monday, Tuesday. We have a crossover in stochastic. So this is setting up nicely for a shot up here to this upper trend line. If you look at the weekly where this plays out, you can see where we are. Okay, I've been pointing out the possibility of a right shoulder here, this head, and the left shoulder, the possibility of this pull back up to the trend line before we turn back over again. Okay, if we zoom out here, we can see where our highs were over the last few years. Alright, so it's highly likely we could see a move back up here. If we get back above this head, this will negate this particular pattern. Okay, so keep that in mind. Gold, we've seen a complete retracement of, not a complete retracement, but at least back to this gap area where we, some of you guys took this trade and gapped down on Monday morning, and we've seen this move back up. So we should be green now on this trade. Stochastics is pointing higher as well. Note silver has been substantially weaker than gold on this gap down. We have yet to get back up and fill this gap at 25.34ish. Stochastics is pointing higher, so there's a possibility this could set up as well. Let's take a look at XLU and some of the components. First Energy, this nice cup that we put in a handle here and create a box setup. Very possible. Highly likely with stochastics where it is. We can see TECO Energy already put in a little handle and broke above this. Is a continuation pattern, obviously. You can see Con Ed held the selling that we put in, bottomed in November, and we put in the right side of this cup with the possibility we get back up here to the 65 level and put in a handle, perhaps set up a box trade in a few weeks, maybe even a pullback this week. Okay, we're stochastics where it is, and then a move higher. Okay, so there's a possibility of two more setups here. This looks pretty strong. WEC, Wisconsin Energy, also cup here. Most all of these in the XLU put in a nice cup and handle pattern. Had a nice pullback to a box trade after a crossover. Most of them crossed over in December after a downtrend and selling pressure after a previous run up. Okay, middle of 2012. Note where we are, summertime. Southern Company, more of the same. XCL, we had a nice box trade here a few weeks back with stochastics oversold. Alright, look for another setup like this, a continuation pattern on a cup and handle again. Look for this to set up in the near future. If we get back to the 10 period or down to a box trade setup in this continuation pattern higher and stochastics gets oversold, we could have a nice setup. Duke Energy. Looking at some of the financial stocks, this is something that I still have half of position in with Wells Fargo. You can see this descending channel that we broke out of on news on Wednesday, I believe it was, that the company was going to increase its dividend by 20% from 25 cents to 30 cents. And we saw some continued strength there. The 127 extension off of this pullback pivot here down to this low is 38.35ish, 38.40 in that range. Okay, so keep an eye on that. If we continue to move above this high that we put in on 411, that high was 37.91. and we're right at that level on Friday. So we could see a move above that, in which case we could see a continuation and a move up to the 127 extension. If we get past that on this dividend news, which is payable on May the 10th, for holders May the 10th, payable in June on June the 1st. Okay, so we could see continued volume coming into this week. Goldman Sachs, I sold my shares on Wednesday. I didn't get this Thursday candle, but it did quite well off of this lower trend line. And note that stochastics, or excuse me, the moving averages did cross over in March. We are moving downward in this pattern. Okay, this first red candle here is a short box setup, so I would look for this to be a continuation and lose the 10 period on Monday if this possibly happens. Also keep an eye on XLF, which, as I pointed out early on, didn't sell off that hard on Thursday and Friday. Bank of America has been in this pretty much sideways range since the beginning of the year. Okay, we bounced 3 times here. We have 3 tops. So watch this one as well for a break, base and break, whether it breaks higher or breaks lower. You can trade it either way. Or if it moves back into this pattern with stochastics rolling over this week. JP Morgan pointed out a few weeks ago the possibility of a head and shoulders. That was in this area here before this right shoulder got put in, and in fact that's exactly what happened. We have this ascending trend line, and we could see this roll over even further, with stochastics being where it is. So watch this on Monday for a move down below the 30 period. This could be interesting. You can already see that Morgan Stanley is moving lower, and we see this descending pattern as well that we broke above on Wells Fargo. Do the other banks do that? It's possible, but the 30 period moving average is holding price back for the time being. So this is a continued short box setup if this turns back down. Some of the smaller banks I follow, this was a box setup on Thursday. We had this tail and then this red candle on Friday. Okay, stochastics looks like it wants to turn over, and MACD, or excuse me, the moving averages have turned as well, or at least have peaked. You can see left shoulder, head, right shoulder on this as well. Ozark, same pattern that I pointed out on Zion. Zion had earnings. We had this box setup. We had a crossover right here. The rule is you take the first red candle once you get into between this zone here, okay, which we got on Friday. So it's possible that this continues to move lower, in which case this could be a nice short if we lose this as well, this low. Okay, so that'd be another level to short against if we lose this level down here. Another bank I follow, these regionals, is HBAN, Huntington Bank shares. Looking for a red candle. We saw a doji on Friday that was close in decision, but still stochastics is where it is. So this could punch back up and retest this 30 period. Keep an eye on that on Huntington Bank. AMX I took in the beginning of the week on this hammer. Got my interest as well as this crossover. It looks like it wants to get back up here. We have this ascending pattern, higher lows, and these 3 or 4 attempts at this level here at the 2150 level, which we tried to hit on Wednesday, Thursday. We could come back down and touch this trend line again, maybe even put in another hammer right around the 30 period. So I'm looking for this to move higher. I have half a position left on this. If we lose this trend line in the 30 period, I'll be stopped out. So keep an eye on the stochastics as well on AMX. That's American Mobile. That's Carlos Slim's company. They operate heavily in South America and those countries, as well as Mexico, I believe. AT&T, on the other hand, had a lousy week. We had this move higher. Stochastics was a lower high. We had a higher high on Tuesday, and then we had earnings and we gapped down below the 30 period. Now we could see a crossover here, in which case if this continues to move lower and we have a crossover, watch for a pullback up into this area between the moving averages for a box setup and a short, if that all plays out correctly. Okay, we got stochastics moving lower. We could see a bounce here and attempt to try to fill this gap, but I don't know. We'll see. Comcast, you can see that we're putting in a lower high here. If the market turns over, this could be something to keep an eye on as well for a move lower. The biotechs did really well over the last couple of months. IBB is one that Heart Pumper follows. I also like Biogen, which is holding this 10 period, continues to move higher. Amgen had less than stellar performance. We came down and we put in a box setup for a long. We'll see how this plays out. If this continues to move lower, we get oversold and the price stays up here, this could be very interesting for a move higher. Genrun, we didn't get our pullback. This continues to hold the 10 period. It's possible that this continues to move higher. We're moving sideways, flagging on REGN. Geron is one that I played with stem cell research back in, what was it, 1999, 2000, 2001, which was a high flyer. Note the crossover this week, past week. If this continues to move higher, watch for your EMA to move higher, and we get prices to come up and pull back into it, into that zone where I have a change of trend and we have a box set up here. Okay, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go to my site, theclosingfriend.com. I cover that in the tutorials section. Okay, so that's Geron. That's one of the last things I'm going to review before I call it quits for the weekend. I hope this helps. If you haven't had a chance to try a 2-week free trial over at Day Trader Bootcamp, be sure to come and check us out for a 2-week free trial. Again, the strategies are here under this section, this pull down menu. Just click here and check out the tutorials, 30-minute opening range and so forth, as well as the indicators that I use, technical analysis and so forth, if you are a new trader. Okay? Take care. We'll see you in the room on Monday.